Hello, wonderful people. I hope you guys are all doing well. Before we start, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel if you like these kind of videos. Also, let us know where are you guys listening us from. Okay then, let's begin. Batman, the Dark Knight of Gotham, has always been portrayed as the paragon of fearlessness. A man who harnesses the fears of others to maintain control over the chaotic city he calls home. Yet, when it comes to Bane, a figure of unparalleled physical strength and strategic brilliance, Batman's composure seems to falter. This raises a question that many fans may overlook. Could Batman's intense fear of Bane be connected not merely to Bane's strength, but to a deeper, secret vulnerability of Batman himself? At first glance, Bane represents a physical threat, capable of breaking Batman both literally and figuratively. But beyond the iconic image of Batman being crushed in the pit of pain, there may lie a more complex psychological interplay that exposes the cracks in the Dark Knight's legendary armor. Bane is unique among Batman's adversaries because he combines raw physical power with a keen, almost intimate understanding of fear and human psychology. Unlike the Joker, whose chaos challenges Batman morally and ethically, or Ra's al Ghul, whose ideology tests Batman's philosophical boundaries, Bane confronts him with a mirror image of human vulnerability. He threatens the very core of what Batman perceives as his invincibility. This is where the theory of Batman's secret weakness begins to emerge. Batman's fear may not solely stem from the risk of physical defeat, but from the realization that there are aspects of his psyche and physical limits he has never confronted. Bane exposes the possibility that Batman's carefully cultivated persona, a blend of mental discipline, tactical brilliance, and physical prowess, is not absolute. There are vulnerabilities that even Gotham's greatest protector cannot entirely control. Looking deeper, one could argue that Batman's secret weakness is intrinsically linked to his obsessive need for control. The trauma of his parents' death created a compulsion to control the chaos around him, to impose order where it seemed impossible. This obsession with mastery over his environment and himself is both his greatest strength and his most significant weakness. Bane, in breaking Batman physically, also challenges this illusion of absolute control. In the legendary confrontation at the pit, Batman's defeat is not only physical, it is an existential blow. Bane forces him to acknowledge that despite all his preparation, training, and intellect, there are forces external and internal that can overpower him. The fear Batman experiences is a reflection of this realization, a confrontation with the fragility of his human limitations. Furthermore, Bane represents more than a physical adversary. He is a psychological catalyst that unearths latent insecurities in Batman's psyche. Batman's drive has always been fueled by guilt, responsibility, and the need to protect Gotham at all costs. But when facing Bane, these motivations are turned inward, forcing Batman to confront questions he has long suppressed. Can he fail? Can his methods be insufficient? Is the very foundation of his identity, his belief in his invulnerability, an illusion? Bane's presence triggers a confrontation not just with strength, but with the unspoken anxieties that haunt Batman, revealing that the Dark Knight's fear is in fact an acknowledgement of an internal truth he struggles to accept. Another angle to consider is the symbolic connection between Bane and Batman's own mortality. Throughout his career, Batman operates under the belief that intellect, strategy, and willpower can mitigate the risks of his human limitations. However, Bane's brute force and relentless determination strip away the illusion of invincibility. This confrontation forces Batman to recognize that his mortality is inescapable, and that beneath the cape and cowl lies a man as vulnerable as any criminal he pursues. The fear he experiences is thus not mere terror. It is a cognitive acknowledgement of the fragility that he has long denied, a secret weakness hidden behind years of rigorous training and psychological fortification. Additionally, Batman's secret weakness may also involve his reliance on symbolism and identity. The persona of Batman has always served as a mask that separates Bruce Wayne's vulnerabilities from the world. However, Bane's assault dismantles this carefully constructed identity, leaving Bruce Wayne exposed. In this context, fear becomes more than a reaction to danger. It becomes a confrontation with the potential collapse of the symbol that defines him. Batman's dread of Bane, therefore, may reveal a deeper anxiety about losing not just the battle, but the essence of who he is. The fear reflects a recognition that physical defeat could have cascading consequences on the very mythology and influence that Batman has cultivated over years of vigilantism. The interplay between Batman's physical and psychological vulnerabilities also suggests that Bane's threat is uniquely personal. While other villains challenge Batman ideologically or morally, Bane targets the intersection of mind and body, highlighting the inseparability of Batman's strength and his secret weaknesses. Each punch, each strategic maneuver, and each manipulation by Bane serves to remind Batman and the audience that the Dark Knight, despite his legendary reputation, is not impervious. This confrontation forces a reconciliation between his idealized self-image and his actual human limitations, providing a rich ground for exploring the connection between fear, vulnerability, and identity. In exploring Batman's fear of Bane, it becomes clear that the Dark Knight's vulnerabilities are not merely physical. They are deeply psychological, rooted in trauma, obsessive control, and identity. Bane's presence magnifies these vulnerabilities, revealing cracks in the armor that Bruce Wayne has spent decades building. The fear Batman experiences is in many ways a mirror reflecting his secret weaknesses, the fragility of his body, the limits of his control, the vulnerability of his symbol, and the existential anxiety of failure. These fears are suppressed in most encounters with criminals, but Bane's unique combination of intellect, strength, and insight exposes them, forcing Batman to confront aspects of himself he has long denied. Moreover, the connection between fear and secret weakness also speaks to the broader narrative of heroism. True heroism, in Batman's context, is not the absence of fear, but the acknowledgement of it and the ability to act despite it. Batman's confrontation with Bane becomes a critical juncture in this narrative, a moment where he must reconcile the duality of his persona, the invincible symbol and the vulnerable human. The fear is not a flaw. It is an essential component of his humanity, a reflection of the very vulnerabilities that make him relatable and compelling as a character. This analysis suggests that Batman's fear of Bane is not an isolated incident of apprehension, but an expression of a profound psychological truth. Bane does not merely challenge Batman's body, he challenges his entire framework of identity, control, and invulnerability. Batman's fear is therefore an acknowledgement of the secret weakness that lies beneath the surface, a weakness that paradoxically fuels his determination and shapes the depth of his heroism. Batman's secret weakness, revealed through the lens of fear, also raises broader questions about the nature of his relationships with other villains and allies. If his fear of Bane is linked to deep-seated vulnerabilities, one can speculate whether other encounters, be it with Ra's al Ghul, the Joker, or even Catwoman, serve to expose additional hidden weaknesses. The fear and tension generated in these confrontations may be interpreted not simply as responses to external threats, but as reflections of internal conflicts that define the Dark Knight's psyche. In essence, the fear of Bane forces Batman and the audience to confront the paradox at the heart of his character. The man who has devoted his life to eradicating fear in Gotham is in fact intimately acquainted with his own. This secret vulnerability, exposed by Bane, illuminates the complexity of Batman as a hero who is simultaneously invincible and deeply human. The fear is both a challenge and a revelation, demonstrating that heroism is not the absence of weakness, but the recognition of it and the courage to continue despite it. Batman's encounter with Bane and the fear it instills in him opens up a broader conversation about vulnerability, control, and identity. This fear is not just a reaction to physical threat, but a confrontation with the core of what it means to be Batman. His fear of Bane challenges not only his physicality but also his psychological resilience. Batman's ability to face adversity is built on the foundation of control over his body, his mind, and his environment. Bane's ability to strip away this control both physically and psychologically forces Batman to grapple with a deep-seated fear he has long suppressed. Batman sips fear of Bane, a reflection of his internal struggles. What is crucial to understand is that Batman's fear of Bane is not rooted solely in Bane's power. Rather, it is a reflection of Batman's internal struggle. Bane represents everything Batman fears, confronting the possibility of physical defeat, the exposure of his vulnerabilities, and the realization that despite all his preparation, there are forces in the world stronger than his willpower. Batman's entire identity is built on his ability to overcome the odds. He trains his body to perfection, his mind to unparalleled sharpness, and his sense of justice to an unwavering ideal. To face Bane, a villain who can not only match him in physicality but also outsmart him, is to be confronted with the terrifying possibility that all his efforts might not be enough. Bane's power, in both a literal and figurative sense, challenges Batman's carefully constructed sense of invincibility. The fear Batman experiences is not just a fear of losing, but a fear of being exposed, of revealing the cracks in his armor that he has worked so hard to conceal. This confrontation with Bane represents the moment when Batman is forced to acknowledge that his greatest fear is not physical harm or even death, but the collapse of the identity he has built for himself. Batman has always seen himself as the protector of Gotham, the one person who can stand against the tide of crime and corruption. To be physically broken by Bane is to confront the possibility that he is not as indestructible as he believes. Fear and vulnerability. Batman SEPs, strength and weakness. Batman's secret weakness is linked to his emotional vulnerability. His entire existence revolves around control, the need to impose order on a chaotic world. The loss of control, whether through physical defeat or emotional exposure, is something that Batman has spent his life avoiding. Bane forces him to confront these fears directly. When Bane breaks Batman physically, it symbolizes the breaking of the psychological wall that Batman has built to keep his vulnerabilities hidden. In this sense, Batman's fear is not only about the loss of physical strength, but the crumbling of his psychological defenses. The fear of Bane represents a confrontation with Batman's own mortality. Throughout his career, Batman has relied on his superior training and intellect to overcome his physical limitations. However, in Bane, He faces an adversary who is as physically dominant as he is mentally sharp. Bane's ability to exploit Batman's weaknesses and defeat him in battle forces Batman to confront the fact that no matter how prepared he is still human. His fear of Bane, therefore, is a fear of his own limitations. He has spent years building a myth around himself, one where he is invincible, but Bane exposes the fallacy of this belief. The fear that arises from Bane's dominance also exposes Batman's greatest insecurity. His fear of failure. Batman's identity is defined by his success in protecting Gotham, but Bane forces him to question whether he is truly capable of achieving his ultimate goal. If Batman, with all his resources, intelligence, and training, can be broken, then what does that say about his mission? The fear of Bane is tied to the fear of his own inadequacy, the possibility that all his efforts to safeguard Gotham have been futile in the face of a more powerful force. The psychological battle. Batman versus Bane. Beyond physical confrontation, Batman's fear of Bane also plays out in a psychological battle. Bane's brilliance lies not only in his strength, but in his ability to manipulate Batman's mind. He understands that to defeat Batman, he must not only break his body, but also his spirit. Bane's strategic use of fear, both in the literal sense of physically breaking Batman and in the symbolic sense of challenging his identity, forces Batman to confront the very essence of who he is. Bane's manipulation of Batman's emotions and mental state highlights the psychological nature of their conflict. Batman has long relied on his ability to compartmentalize his emotions, burying his fears, doubts, and vulnerabilities in order to remain focused on his mission. However, Bane's relentless assault exposes the fragility of this mental construct. By stripping away Batman's physical prowess, Bane forces him to face the emotional toll of his vigilante life, including the fear of failing those he swore to protect. The psychological impact of Bane's actions is as devastating as the physical defeat, as Batman is forced to confront the possibility that his entire identity is built on a foundation that can be shattered. This psychological battle also reflects Batman's ongoing struggle with his own humanity. Throughout his career, he has distanced himself from others, viewing his emotions and vulnerabilities as weaknesses to be suppressed. Bane's attack forces Batman to confront these vulnerabilities, both physically and emotionally. The fear of being broken by Bane is tied to the fear of being exposed, not just as a man capable of being defeated, but as someone who is deeply human, with fears, flaws, and limitations that cannot be controlled or hidden. The symbol of fear. Batman and Bane's interconnected struggles. Bane, much like Batman, uses fear as a tool. Batman's strength comes from his ability to instill fear in others, using it to control Gotham's criminal underworld. However, Bane's use of fear is more direct. He forces Batman to confront his own limitations, his own frailties. Bane's mastery over fear exposes Batman's greatest vulnerability, the fear of being powerless, the fear of failing those he seeks to protect, and the fear that his efforts to restore justice to Gotham will ultimately be in vain. The connection between Batman's fear of Bane and his secret weakness is also symbolized in the way Bane uses his environment to break Batman mentally and physically. In the pit where Batman is imprisoned, he faces not only physical pain but the psychological anguish of being trapped in a situation where he is powerless. His inability to escape, his reliance on others for help, and his eventual realization that he must face his fears head-on all contribute to the unraveling of his persona. Bane's ability to break Batman both physically and mentally represents a fundamental shift in Batman's journey, a moment where he is forced to acknowledge his weaknesses and begin the painful process of rebuilding himself. The path to redemption. Batman sips recovery and transformation. Batman's fear of Bane, while deeply personal and tied to his vulnerabilities, ultimately leads to his redemption. The process of recovery and overcoming Bane's influence is symbolic of Batman's growth as a character. By facing his fear and embracing his limitations, Batman not only overcomes Bane's physical power, but also gains a deeper understanding of himself. His recovery is not just about physical strength, it is about accepting his vulnerability, confronting the fear that has always driven him, and emerging as a more complete version of himself. In this way, Batman's fear of Bane serves as a catalyst for his transformation. By confronting his secret weakness, Batman is able to evolve from a figure who relies solely on fear and control to one who understands the complexities of his humanity. This growth allows him to become a more effective hero, not because he is invulnerable, but because he has learned to accept his weaknesses and fears. Bane's role, therefore, is not just to challenge Batman's strength, but to push him toward a deeper understanding of his own humanity. As we continue to explore the psychological and emotional dimensions of Batman's fear of Bane, we begin to see how Bane's challenge transcends a mere physical battle. The interaction between these two characters is not only about strength versus strength, but about the profound psychological conflict that forces Batman to face his darkest fears and deepest insecurities. Batman Sith's psychological struggle. Fear as a catalyst for change. The key to understanding Batman's fear of Bane lies in the fact that it represents a critical moment of psychological reckoning for the Dark Knight. Throughout his career, Batman has crafted an image of himself as the ultimate force of justice, someone who can never be defeated, someone who controls his destiny through sheer force of will. However, Bane shatters this image in an instant. His assault on Batman's body and mind reveals the truth. Batman has long avoided he is not invincible, and his strength, whether physical, mental, or emotional, can be broken. Bane, through his physical superiority and psychological manipulation, forces Batman to confront his own mortality and limitations. This battle with Bane is not just about physical survival. It is a metaphorical confrontation with Batman's own fears about failure, loss of control, and the possibility that he cannot protect Gotham. Batman has always relied on his unwavering commitment to justice and control, but in facing Bane, he is forced to accept that control is an illusion. His defeat at the hands of Bane is not just a loss of power, but a recognition that fear, vulnerability, and failure are part of the human experience, even for Batman. The process of overcoming Bane and ultimately emerging victorious is transformative for Batman. He must rebuild not only his body, but also his sense of self. He must reconcile the fear that Bane exposes with the very identity he has created for himself. This journey is not just about regaining his strength. It is about coming to terms with his vulnerabilities, accepting that his mission is not about perfection or invulnerability, but about resilience in the face of his weaknesses. The fear of failure. Batman Sith's deepest insecurity. At the heart of Batman's fear of Bane is his deep-seated fear of failure. Batman's entire identity is tied to his ability to protect Gotham and ensure that justice prevails. He has built himself up as a symbol of unwavering strength, someone who never falters. To be defeated by Bane, someone who represents the exact opposite of everything Batman stands for, forces him to confront the possibility that he might fail that he might not be able to save Gotham from the forces of chaos and corruption. This fear of failure is particularly difficult for Batman to face because it challenges the core of his identity. He has spent his entire life preparing to protect Gotham, driven by the trauma of losing his parents and the guilt of not being able to save them. His fear of failing Gotham, or worse, failing the people who depend on him, is what drives him every day. Bane's challenge to Batman forces him to confront the possibility that no matter how much he trains, how much he plans, or how strong he becomes, he is still human, and failure is inevitable. This vulnerability that Batman is capable of failing, of being broken, of being defeated, hits him harder than any physical injury ever could. To have his physical limitations exposed by Bane is to confront the greatest fear of his existence, that his efforts, no matter how great, might not be enough. Batman's fear of Bane is not just fear of pain or defeat, but fear of losing his purpose, his reason for being, and the very core of his identity. This is why his defeat is so much more than a physical breakdown. It is an existential one. Bane and the symbolism of power. Bane is an interesting adversary for Batman because he represents more than just a threat to Batman's physical body. Bane is a symbol of raw, unrestrained power, an unstoppable force that challenges the carefully constructed systems that Batman has spent years building. While Batman relies on intellect, strategy, and control, Bane's strength comes from brute force and an understanding of Batman's weaknesses. This duality, where Batman is forced to fight against something he cannot outthink or overpower, forces him to grapple with a deeply unsettling realization that there are forces in the world that cannot be controlled, and that his methodical approach to life is not infallible. Bane's physical strength and strategic mind force Batman to step outside his comfort zone. In many ways, Bane represents the uncontrollable aspects of life that Batman has spent his whole existence trying to suppress or control. Through Bane, Batman is forced to confront the chaotic, unpredictable forces of the world, forces that Batman, no matter how prepared, cannot contain. This challenge is psychologically overwhelming for Batman, as it exposes the vulnerability of his carefully constructed self-image and brings to the forefront the hidden weaknesses he has long buried. The pit, as a metaphor for Batman's inner struggle. One of the most powerful elements of Batman's encounter with Bane is the pit in which Batman is imprisoned. The pit, both literally and metaphorically, represents a state of despair, isolation, and vulnerability. When Bane throws Batman into the pit, he is not just imprisoning him physically, but also forcing him to confront the psychological isolation that comes with being Batman. Batman has always been a solitary figure, driven by a deep sense of guilt and responsibility. His loneliness, the separation between himself and the world he seeks to protect, is one of his greatest weaknesses. In the pit, Batman faces not only physical exhaustion but the emotional weight of his isolation. The pit represents the point at which Batman's fear of failure, his loneliness, and his vulnerability converge. For the first time, Batman is forced to rely on something other than control. He must confront his fear, his limitations, and his mortality in order to rise above his situation. The journey to escape the pit is not just about physical recovery, it is a psychological and emotional rebirth. Batman's path to redemption is a painful one, but it is through this struggle that he overcomes the fear and weakness that Bane exposed in him. Reconciliation with fear. Batman's true strength. In the end, Batman's recovery from Bane's assault is not just about overcoming physical injury, it is about reconciling with his own fear. Bane's defeat teaches Batman that fear is not something to be controlled or suppressed, but something that must be faced and accepted. Batman's fear of Bane and the secret weakness it revealed is not a sign of failure. It is a testament to his humanity. True strength, Batman learns, comes not from invulnerability, but from the ability to rise above fear and weakness. Batman's victory over Bane is ultimately a victory over himself. By facing his vulnerabilities, accepting his limitations, and overcoming his fear of failure, Batman grows stronger. His journey is one of emotional and psychological evolution, where he learns that true strength lies in embracing his human vulnerabilities and using them to fuel his resolve. His battle with Bane is not just a fight for survival, it is a fight for self-acceptance, and in the end, Batman emerges not just physically stronger, but emotionally and mentally fortified. As we continue to explore the psychological depths of Batman's fear of Bane, it becomes increasingly clear that this encounter represents a pivotal moment in Batman's development, not only as a hero but as a person. The fear that Bane instills in Batman exposes hidden cracks in the Dark Knight's psyche and forces him to confront the vulnerabilities he has worked his entire life to suppress. What is especially fascinating about Batman's struggle with Bane is how it transcends the physical battle. It becomes a metaphor for Batman's internal struggle, his confrontation with his own limitations, his past trauma, and his desire for control. Fear of vulnerability, the paradox of Batman's heroism. Batman's greatest strength is also his greatest vulnerability. His ability to control his fears and use them as tools to dominate his enemies. For much of his career, Batman has been portrayed as an unflinching symbol of strength and justice, a figure who inspires fear in the hearts of criminals. However, his fear of Bane exposes the paradox at the heart of Batman's heroism. His fear, while integral to his persona, is also what makes him human. In his fight against Bane, Batman is forced to confront the reality that despite his immense strength, intelligence, and willpower, he is not invincible. This realization shakes the foundation of his identity and his entire approach to being a hero. For Batman, vulnerability is anathema. Throughout his life, he has structured his existence around control of his body, his emotions, and his environment. His fear of failure, stemming from his traumatic childhood, has been the driving force behind his relentless pursuit of justice. But when Bane overpowers him, both physically and psychologically, Batman is confronted with a harsh truth. His attempts to suppress fear and vulnerability are not sustainable. This confrontation with Bane forces him to reassess the very foundations of his identity as he grapples with the fear that he may not be able to protect Gotham and those he loves. Bane as the mirror, Batman sits, shadow self. Bane's role in this psychological drama is that of a mirror to Batman, a dark reflection of the Dark Knight himself. Bane, like Batman, is a product of tragedy and suffering, and his intelligence and physical prowess make him a worthy adversary. What makes Bane especially dangerous is his deep understanding of fear. He knows how to manipulate it, how to break people both physically and mentally. Where Batman uses fear as a tool to dominate and control, Bane uses fear as a weapon to shatter Batman's sense of invulnerability. Bane is also a reflection of what Batman fears most, that he is not in control, that his methods are flawed, and that his mission is doomed to fail. In their confrontation, Bane exposes Batman's deepest insecurities. Bane, in his ruthless pursuit of power, forces Batman to confront the dark aspects of himself, his vulnerabilities, his fear of loss, and his inability to fully protect Gotham. This confrontation is symbolic. Batman, the protector, is forced to acknowledge that even he has limits, and in doing so, he is reminded of the very human side of himself that he has tried so desperately to suppress. This psychological battle with Bane serves as a catharsis for Batman. By facing his deepest fears and weaknesses, Batman begins the process of coming to terms with his humanity. He learns that fear is not something to be conquered or buried, but something that must be understood and embraced. Batman's fear of Bane is ultimately a reflection of his own shadow self, the part of him that he has tried to repress in his pursuit of perfection. Bane, as Batman's mirror image, forces him to confront this shadow and begin the difficult process of self-acceptance. Bane sits, tactical genius, turning Batman's strengths against him. Another crucial aspect of Batman's fear of Bane is Bane's strategic genius. Unlike many of Batman's other enemies, who rely on brute force or chaotic madness, Bane is a master tactician. He understands Batman's strengths and weaknesses and knows exactly how to exploit them. Bane's ability to systematically break down Batman, both physically and emotionally, makes him the perfect adversary. He does not simply rely on power. He understands how to manipulate Batman's mind, his emotions, and his sense of self. Bane's strategic use of fear is designed to break Batman's spirit. He forces Batman into a position where he must confront his limitations head-on. This is most evident in the moment when Batman is imprisoned in the pit. Bane not only physically restrains Batman, but he also strips him of his identity as Gotham's protector. The pit symbolizes Batman's psychological collapse, a place where his control, his strength, and his sense of purpose are entirely stripped away. In this moment of vulnerability, Batman is forced to confront the very thing he has been avoiding: his humanity, his fear of failure, and his deep-seated insecurities. The way Bane manipulates Batman's mind throughout their conflict is key to understanding why Batman is so fearful of him. Bane's mastery of psychological warfare forces Batman to recognize that his greatest asset, his mind, can also be his greatest liability. In the past, Batman has relied on his intellect and his ability to anticipate and outthink his enemies. However, Bane's ability to anticipate Batman's every move and outmaneuver him at every turn forces Batman to confront the fact that his intellect is not enough to guarantee victory. This realization is deeply unsettling for Batman, as it challenges the very core of his identity as a strategist and a tactician. Batman's journey of self-acceptance, overcoming fear through vulnerability. Ultimately, Batman's encounter with Bane is a journey of self-discovery. While Batman's physical defeat at the hands of Bane is a significant moment in his character arc, it is his psychological recovery that marks the true turning point in his evolution. In the pit, Batman is forced to confront his own weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and the fear he has long sought to control. It is only by embracing this fear and accepting his limitations that he is able to overcome Bane and emerge stronger. This journey is symbolic of the broader human experience. Batman, like all individuals, must confront the parts of himself he has long avoided: his vulnerabilities, his fear of failure, and his inability to always protect the people he cares about. Bane's challenge forces Batman to let go of his need for control and accept that true strength comes not from invulnerability, but from resilience in the face of fear. By facing his own vulnerabilities and fears, Batman is able to transcend his limitations and continue his mission with a deeper understanding of himself. Through this process of psychological and emotional growth, Batman becomes a more complete and empathetic hero. His fear of Bane, while initially a sign of weakness, ultimately becomes a catalyst for his transformation. The fear of Bane is not a sign of defeat, but a recognition of his humanity. By confronting his deepest fears, Batman becomes a more authentic and resilient hero, one who understands that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a source of strength. As we move forward in examining Batman's fear of Bane and its connection to his deeper vulnerabilities, we explore how this confrontation ultimately reshapes the very fabric of Batman's identity, and how Bane's challenge serves as a pivotal point for Batman to reflect on his purpose, his limits, and his methods. The fear that Bane instills in Batman is not just a momentary shock. It is a complex, enduring force that forces Batman to question everything he has stood for, leading to a profound transformation in his character. Bane as a catalyst for Batman's rebirth. Bane is not just another villain in Batman's rogues gallery. He represents the culmination of Batman's fears and limitations. Throughout Batman's journey, he has faced criminals, ideologues, and anarchists, but none have truly challenged the essence of who he is. Bane, however, pushes Batman to his breaking point, forcing him to confront the ultimate truth that despite all his preparation, strength, and training, he is still human. In doing so, Bane becomes the catalyst for Batman's rebirth. The pit in which Batman is imprisoned is symbolic of his mental and emotional collapse, representing the darkest depths of his psyche. It is within this metaphorical and physical space that Batman must confront the core of his fears, his vulnerability, his failure, and his limitations. To escape the pit, Batman must let go of the persona he has created for himself, the invulnerable protector of Gotham. He must come to terms with the reality that he is not invincible, that he cannot control everything, and that failure is a possibility he must learn to accept. In the process of overcoming Bane's physical and psychological dominance, Batman goes through a profound transformation. He learns that true strength comes not from fearlessness, but from the ability to face fear head-on, to accept vulnerability, and to rise above it. Batman's defeat and subsequent recovery symbolize the growth of his character, as he evolves from a hero driven by the fear of failure into a more self-aware and resilient individual. This journey represents the power of vulnerability and the importance of embracing one's weaknesses in order to become stronger. The loss of control, Batman's deepest fear, and its implications. One of the central themes of Batman's fear of Bane is the loss of control. For much of his life, Batman has prided himself on his ability to control every aspect of his existence. His obsessive training, his disciplined mind, and his meticulous planning are all part of the persona he has cultivated as the protector of Gotham. But when Bane shatters his body and breaks his spirit, Batman is forced to confront the reality that control is an illusion. The fear of losing control is one of Batman's greatest psychological barriers, and Bane's challenge exposes that vulnerability. Batman's fear of losing control is tied to his trauma. The death of his parents, his inability to prevent it, and his subsequent determination to control every variable in his life have shaped his identity. Batman believes that if he can control everything around him, he can prevent harm and ensure justice. However, Bane's overpowering presence forces him to realize that there are forces beyond his control, both external and internal. This loss of control is terrifying for Batman, as it undermines the very foundation of his identity and his sense of purpose. The idea that he could fail, that he might not be able to save Gotham, is anathema to everything Batman has fought for. However, It is through confronting this loss of control that Batman is ultimately able to grow. By accepting that he cannot control everything, Batman begins to understand the value of letting go. His struggle with Bane is not just about physical recovery, but about reclaiming his sense of self and his purpose in a way that is no longer bound by an illusion of control. In learning to embrace his vulnerability, Batman is able to rise above his fear of losing control, ultimately becoming a more complete and adaptable hero. Bane, as Batman's mirror, the power of vulnerability. A critical aspect of Batman's fear of Bane is the way in which Bane serves as a mirror to Batman himself. Bane, like Batman, is shaped by trauma and a desire for control. Both characters have experienced loss. Both have used their pain to fuel their strength, and both have built identities around the need for power. However, Bane represents a more unrestrained version of Batman's own drive, where Batman uses his intellect, discipline, and physical prowess to control Gotham. Bane uses his sheer strength and ruthlessness to break Batman both physically and psychologically. In Bane, Batman sees a reflection of what he could become if he were to abandon his moral code, his discipline, and his humanity. This mirror image is key to understanding Batman's fear. Bane challenges Batman's identity not just by overpowering him, but by showing him that the very things Batman relies on to protect Gotham, the control, the structure, the preparation, can be undone. Bane's strength becomes a metaphor for Batman's own fear of losing control, of becoming consumed by his own drive for power. Bane forces Batman to confront the possibility that his relentless pursuit of justice and control could lead him down a path of destruction, much like Bane himself. By facing Bane, Batman is forced to confront the darker aspects of his own personality, the aspects he has long repressed. Bane becomes the catalyst for Batman's self-reflection, forcing him to question his methods, his motivations, and his identity. In this confrontation, Batman learns that true strength is not about power or control, but about understanding and embracing his vulnerabilities. It is only by accepting his human limitations that Batman can rise above Bane's challenge and emerge stronger. The true nature of Batman sips fear, beyond physical defeat. While Batman's fear of Bane is certainly tied to the physical threat Bane poses, it is ultimately about something deeper. The fear of becoming something he despises, the fear of failing in his mission, and the fear of losing control over his own life. The physical defeat that Bane inflicts on Batman serves as a catalyst for Batman to face these fears head-on. But the true battle is not in the physical realm. It is in the psychological and emotional space where Batman must confront his own weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Bane's actions force Batman to grapple with the essence of what it means to be a hero. Batman has spent his life fighting for justice, trying to impose order on a chaotic world. But Bane's challenge reveals that justice and order cannot always be imposed through strength and control. True justice, as Batman comes to understand, comes from acknowledging one's vulnerabilities and working through them. In this sense, Bane's fear-inducing presence ultimately helps Batman evolve into a more human, more grounded hero, one who is no longer defined by the illusion of invulnerability. The transformation, Batman accepts fear as a source of strength. By the end of their conflict, Batman's fear of Bane becomes a source of strength. Having faced the darkest aspects of himself, Batman emerges with a renewed understanding of his purpose and his limitations. His fear of Bane, once a symbol of his vulnerability, becomes a defining moment in his journey towards self-acceptance. Batman realizes that his true strength does not come from his ability to dominate others or control every situation. It comes from his resilience in the face of fear, his willingness to rise again after being broken, and his capacity to learn from his own vulnerabilities. In embracing his fear, Batman is able to transform it from a source of weakness into a source of empowerment. He learns that fear, rather than being something to avoid or suppress, is an essential part of his humanity. It is through this process of embracing his vulnerabilities that Batman becomes a more complete hero, one who understands that true power lies not in invincibility, but in the courage to face and overcome the fears that lie within. As we continue to explore Batman's psychological evolution through his fear of Bane, it becomes clear that this pivotal encounter shifts the very essence of who Batman is. By confronting Bane, Batman not only faces a physical challenge, but also a deeper, more existential crisis that leads him to reframe his understanding of heroism, strength, and his own humanity. Bane, with his raw power and strategic genius, exposes Batman's most significant vulnerabilities, making this battle one that extends far beyond Gotham's streets. The fear of vulnerability. Batman sips humanizing moment. Batman's fear of Bane ultimately leads to one of the most humanizing moments in his journey as Gotham's protector. For years, Batman has been the symbol of invulnerability, a hero who stands apart from the world he protects. His armor is as much psychological as it is physical, with his emotional wounds buried beneath the surface. Batman's refusal to acknowledge his vulnerability and mortality has allowed him to continue his mission with unwavering determination. But in his battle with Bane, those walls are broken down. Bane's brutal assault, both physical and psychological, forces Batman to face the reality that no amount of preparation, no amount of strength or training can protect him from the fundamental truth of his human limitations. Bane's triumph is not just in breaking Batman's back, it is in breaking the idea that Batman is untouchable, that his resolve cannot be shaken. By exposing Batman's vulnerabilities, Bane forces him to acknowledge his mortality, a reality that Batman has long fought to suppress. This confrontation with vulnerability, painful as it is, becomes the beginning of Batman's transformation. In realizing that fear, weakness, and failure are part of his humanity, Batman takes the first steps toward becoming a more authentic hero. His ability to rise from the depths of Bane's pit symbolizes a shift in his understanding of heroism, not as the absence of fear, but as the willingness to confront it, to overcome it, and to continue fighting despite it. Bane is the catalyst for Batman's self-reflection. Bane's psychological manipulation also plays a significant role in the way Batman views himself. Whereas many of Batman's enemies have tested him physically, Bane takes a far more insidious approach. He does not simply overpower Batman with brute force, he forces Batman to reckon with his own limitations. Bane knows that Batman's greatest strength is his ability to control, to always stay ahead of his enemies. By making Batman face the reality that his control is limited, Bane pushes Batman to reflect on his purpose, his methods, and his identity. Throughout his career, Batman has operated under the assumption that his methods are the only way to save Gotham. His obsessive need for control has been driven by guilt, responsibility, and a desire to prevent others from experiencing the same trauma he did as a child. But Bane's manipulation, particularly in the pit, challenges Batman's belief in his methods. The physical and emotional torment Batman faces is a direct challenge to his approach. He cannot control everything, and his relentless pursuit of justice is not the answer to all of Gotham's problems. Bane, in many ways, serves as a mirror to Batman. While Batman channels his fear into control, Bane embraces fear and chaos as a means of domination. Their contrasting approaches force Batman to question his own beliefs, forcing him into a period of self-reflection. As Batman recovers, he begins to realize that true heroism does not come from controlling every aspect of his environment, but from understanding and confronting his vulnerabilities. The importance of Batman Sit's recovery. The journey from fear to strength. The process of recovery from Bane's attack is not merely physical, it is an emotional and psychological journey that represents Batman's growth as a person and as a hero. His time in the pit, while physically painful, offers Batman the space he needs to reflect on the core of his identity. To rise from that pit and emerge victorious is a profound metaphor for Batman's recovery. It represents not just the restoration of his physical strength, but the acceptance of his flaws, his humanity, and his fears. The journey of recovery is crucial because it allows Batman to evolve from someone who relies solely on strength and control to someone who understands the power of resilience and adaptability. In the pit, Batman must learn to let go of his fear of failure. The realization that he can't control every outcome or prevent every disaster forces him to approach his mission with a new mindset. His strength, he learns, does not lie in invulnerability, but in his ability to keep going, despite the fear and failure he has always feared. The fear Batman experiences in the pit and the subsequent healing reflect a deeper shift in his understanding of power. Rather than seeing power as the ability to control and dominate, Batman comes to understand that true power comes from the capacity to face fear head-on and emerge from it stronger. This transformation allows Batman to fight with renewed determination, knowing that his fear does not define him. It is a part of him that he can use to fuel his drive for justice. Fear as a motivator. Batman Sit's new approach to heroism. In the aftermath of his defeat and recovery, the Batman's relationship with fear fundamentally changes. Whereas he once used fear as a weapon to dominate his enemies, he now begins to understand fear as a motivator for himself. Fear no longer represents something to be controlled or suppressed. It becomes a driving force that helps Batman connect with his humanity. In embracing his vulnerabilities, Batman becomes a more relatable hero, one who is not invulnerable but resilient, a hero who can face the darkest parts of himself and still rise to fight. This shift in Batman's approach to fear also has broader implications for his role in Gotham. By accepting his vulnerabilities, Batman becomes a more empathetic protector. He no longer sees himself as the sole savior of Gotham, the invincible hero who can fix everything. Instead, he recognizes that Gotham's problems cannot be solved through force alone. The fight for justice is a collective effort, and Batman, in accepting his limitations, learns to work with others, whether through his relationships with allies like Robin, Commissioner Gordon, or even Catwoman. Batman's renewed understanding of fear also strengthens his resolve. He no longer views fear as an obstacle but as an essential part of his identity. His fear becomes a source of motivation, driving him to continue his mission despite the challenges he faces. The fear that once threatened to break him now propels him forward, ensuring that Batman remains a symbol of resilience, not perfection. In this way, Batman's fear of Bane, while devastating at the time, becomes the catalyst for a deeper understanding of what it truly means to be a hero. The emotional and psychological transformation Batman undergoes as a result of his fear of Bane creates a new lens through which he views himself, his role as a hero, and his place in Gotham. The lessons learned from his physical defeat and subsequent recovery reverberate across his entire existence, shaping the way he interacts with the world around him. The redefinition of strength, vulnerability as a source of power. Batman's physical recovery from Bane's assault is only one aspect of his transformation. The more profound change occurs in how Batman redefines his concept of strength. Before facing Bane, Batman believed that invulnerability and control were the ultimate markers of his power. His identity was rooted in the belief that if he could control every aspect of his life and mission, he would be able to protect Gotham without fail. Bane's challenge, however, forces him to acknowledge that strength does not come from complete control or from being impervious to harm. Instead, it comes from the ability to confront one's own vulnerability, to endure in the face of fear, and to continue fighting despite the inherent uncertainty and risk of failure. This realization is a turning point for Batman. He learns that true power lies not in avoiding or suppressing fear, but in using fear as a motivator, a means to grow stronger. Rather than continuing to hide behind the mask of invincibility, Batman embraces his human limitations and vulnerabilities. His fear of Bane, once a paralyzing force, becomes the catalyst for this shift. It is through this confrontation with fear that Batman comes to understand that vulnerability does not diminish his power. It enhances it, providing him with the courage to move forward, even when the odds seem insurmountable. The ability to accept and work with his vulnerabilities allows Batman to become a more resilient and grounded hero. No longer does he rely on an image of invincibility to inspire Gotham or maintain control over his emotions. Instead, Batman's strength is now derived from his willingness to face fear, to acknowledge his limitations, and to rise from each challenge stronger than before. This shift in his understanding of strength represents a more human version of Batman, one who is not driven solely by the need for control, but by the courage to keep going, even when he is afraid. Bane's legacy, a more reflective and strategic Batman. While Bane's direct influence on Batman's physical and psychological state is evident, the legacy of their confrontation extends far beyond their battle. Bane's unique ability to strip away Batman's facade forces Batman to reconsider not only his approach to fear, but also his entire method of crime fighting. Batman, having always been a figure of preparation and strategy, now realizes that his greatest asset is not simply his intellect or his ability to predict and control every variable. It is his adaptability. Bane's brutal tactics, attacking Batman both physically and mentally, reveal to Batman that flexibility is a crucial component of survival. In the past, Batman relied on meticulous planning, creating contingencies for every possible scenario. While this strategic thinking remains a key part of Batman's approach, the lesson learned from Bane's attack is that rigid control can be as much a weakness as it is a strength. Batman must now embrace a more fluid approach to his mission, one that allows him to adapt to situations as they arise and respond to unexpected challenges without the fear of losing control. This evolution in Batman's strategic thinking marks a shift in how he approaches his role as Gotham's protector. While his analytical mind remains sharp, he learns that true success comes from being able to adjust to changing circumstances, to embrace uncertainty, and to trust in his ability to navigate the unknown. This lesson shapes Batman's future decisions, both as a leader and as a solo crusader, allowing him to be more effective in combating Gotham's ever-evolving criminal landscape. The emotional weight of Batman's mission, a new perspective. Another significant shift that results from Batman's fear of Bane is his evolving perspective on the emotional toll of his mission. For years, Batman has isolated himself from others, pushing away friends, allies, and even potential romantic relationships in order to stay focused on his mission. This isolation is a byproduct of his belief that he must be an unfeeling, indomitable force, a symbol of justice, who operates outside of emotional influence. However, Bane's assault forces Batman to confront the emotional cost of his crusade. While in the pit, broken both physically and mentally, Batman is reminded of the emotional burden he carries. His quest for justice has isolated him from others, but it has also left him emotionally scarred. The fear of failure, the inability to protect those he loves, and the constant need to push forward without allowing himself the space to grieve or process his trauma have taken a toll on his psyche. Bane's challenge forces Batman to reevaluate his relationship with his emotions. Rather than suppressing his feelings, Batman learns the importance of confronting them, processing them, and using them to fuel his resolve. This new perspective on the emotional weight of his mission marks a significant growth in Batman's character. He begins to understand that it is not weakness to acknowledge his emotional pain. It is strength. His ability to use his emotional wounds as a source of motivation, rather than hiding from them, makes him a more complete hero. This shift allows Batman to become more empathetic toward those he protects, recognizing that vulnerability and emotional openness are integral to truly understanding the people of Gotham. Batman sits, Fear of Bane, a legacy of self-awareness and growth. Ultimately, Batman's fear of Bane becomes a critical part of his legacy. While Batman has always been a character defined by his strength, discipline, and relentless pursuit of justice, it is his ability to confront his fear and vulnerability that allows him to grow. Bane's attack, while devastating, becomes the catalyst for Batman's deeper self-awareness, forcing him to acknowledge the parts of himself he has long ignored, his limitations, his vulnerabilities, and his emotional needs. Through this confrontation, Batman learns that fear is not something to be eliminated. It is a part of who he is, and it can be used as a source of power. His transformation from a hero who seeks control and invulnerability to one who accepts his humanity and embraces his weaknesses is a defining moment in his journey. Batman's fear of Bane is not just a moment of defeat, it is the moment that enables him to transcend his limitations and become the hero Gotham truly needs. As Batman rises from the pit and faces Bane again, he does so not with the arrogance of someone who believes they are invincible, but with the wisdom of someone who understands that true strength lies in accepting one's vulnerabilities. This acceptance allows him to approach his mission with a renewed sense of purpose, recognizing that the true battle is not against external enemies, but against the fear and doubt within himself. Batman's fear of Bane, while initially a source of weakness, ultimately becomes the source of his greatest strength. As we move deeper into the aftermath of Batman's confrontation with Bane, it becomes clear that the experience leaves an indelible mark on Batman, reshaping how he approaches both his personal and professional life. The fear Batman experiences in the face of Bane's brutality is not just a passing moment of weakness, it is a transformative force that redefines Batman's identity and his approach to heroism, relationships, and leadership. The transformation of Batman sips leadership, embracing the strength of vulnerability. One of the most significant outcomes of Batman's experience with Bane is the evolution of his leadership style. Batman has always been a solitary figure, relying on his individual strength and determination to fight for justice. However, his physical defeat and psychological breakdown at Bane's hands force him to reassess his approach to leadership. In the past, Batman has led with an almost authoritarian mindset. His methods were grounded in control, structure, and an unwavering sense of duty. But Bane's attack, and Batman's subsequent recovery highlight the limitations of this leadership style. In the wake of his defeat, Batman begins to understand that effective leadership does not come from dominance or perfection. It comes from understanding, empathy, and the ability to adapt to challenges. His ability to lead others, whether in his relationships with Robin, Nightwing, or even allies like Alfred and Commissioner Gordon, is strengthened by his newfound understanding of vulnerability. Rather than hiding his weaknesses, Batman learns that acknowledging them and working through them with the support of others is what makes him a more capable leader. This shift in leadership also ties into Batman's evolving view of Gotham, where he once saw himself as the lone protector of the city, the singular figure who could shoulder the entire burden of Gotham's salvation. He now understands that his role as a hero is part of a larger effort. Gotham's future is not solely dependent on Batman's strength, but on the collective effort of its people. By embracing his vulnerabilities, Batman becomes more open to working with others and trusting in their abilities to contribute to Gotham's safety and healing. The complex dynamics of Batman's relationships post-Bane. Another critical area where Batman's fear of Bane has lasting effects is in his relationships. Before Bane's challenge, Batman often distanced himself from those who cared for him. His isolation was both a protective mechanism and a result of his obsessive focus on his mission. Batman believed that in order to protect Gotham, he must remain detached and controlled, cutting himself off from relationships that might weaken his resolve. However, his vulnerability in the face of Bane's onslaught forces Batman to confront the importance of human connection. The emotional toll of his battle with Bane brings him closer to the people around him, particularly his closest allies, Alfred, Robin, and Gordon. Bane's defeat reminds Batman that he is not infallible, and he can no longer afford to carry the burden of Gotham's protection alone. He must allow others into his world, accept their help, and lean on them in moments of weakness. This shift in his relationships, while difficult for Batman, is essential to his growth. His fear of Bane, which initially isolated him, ultimately fosters a deeper sense of connection and interdependence with those who care for him. Batman learns that true strength lies not in solitude, but in the ability to trust others and work together for a common cause. This new perspective on his relationships enhances Batman's ability to function not only as a leader, but also as a friend, mentor, and ally. Bane SIP's role in Batman SIP's moral development. Bane's presence in Batman's life extends far beyond their physical confrontation. It forces Batman to reconsider his moral compass. For much of his career, Batman has followed a rigid moral code, one defined by his refusal to kill and his determination to fight crime without resorting to violence or excessive brutality. However, Bane's challenge forces Batman to reassess this code, especially as he confronts his own feelings of fear, failure, and loss. Batman's fear of Bane is not only a fear of physical harm, but also a fear of moral compromise. Bane forces Batman to confront the possibility that his methods, his refusal to kill, his obsessive need for control, and his single-minded focus on justice may be insufficient in the face of true evil. For the first time, Batman begins to question whether his moral code is as unshakable as he once believed. Bane's strategic genius and his ability to break Batman both physically and emotionally force Batman to consider the limits of his approach to justice. This moral dilemma is central to Batman's evolution. His fear of Bane becomes a catalyst for Batman to broaden his understanding of what it means to be a hero. Instead of adhering strictly to a moral code that once defined him, Batman learns that justice is not a simple black and white issue. His battle with Bane teaches him the complexities of morality, how personal trauma, fear, and failure can shape one's ethical decisions, and how sometimes the path to justice is not as clear-cut as he once thought. The evolution of Batman sips symbolism. In addition to the personal and relational changes that occur as a result of Bane's fear, there is a more significant evolution in Batman's role as a symbol. Before Bane, Batman was largely seen as a solitary, untouchable figure, a symbol of fear and control in Gotham. However, following his physical and emotional defeat, Batman's symbolism becomes more nuanced. The image of the invincible Dark Knight begins to shift. The people of Gotham, as well as Batman himself, begin to see that he is not a perfect hero. He is a man, vulnerable to the same fears, doubts, and failures as anyone else. This new symbolism represents a more human Batman, one who inspires not only fear but hope. The fear he once used to control criminals is now tempered with an understanding that heroism lies not in perfection, but in resilience and the ability to rise from adversity. Batman's transformation into a more self-aware and emotionally grounded figure allows him to resonate with Gotham's citizens on a deeper level. They no longer see him as an unapproachable force, but as a symbol of what it means to confront fear, struggle, and ultimately persevere. Fear and redemption. Batman Sep's final victory over Bane. Ultimately, the fear Batman experiences in the face of Bane becomes a necessary part of his redemption. It is through this fear that Batman undergoes the most significant evolution of his career. The fear is not a weakness. It is a source of strength. By embracing his vulnerabilities, Batman becomes a more complete version of himself, a hero who not only fights for justice but understands the complexities of human emotion and weakness. Bane, in challenging Batman to confront these fears, helps Batman achieve a level of self-awareness that he could not have reached without this confrontation. In the end, Batman's victory over Bane is not just physical, it is psychological and emotional. Batman emerges from this battle not just stronger but wiser, with a more profound understanding of his own limitations, his relationships, and his moral code. This process of self-acceptance, prompted by his fear of Bane, is what ultimately enables Batman to remain Gotham's protector, not as an invincible figure, but as a resilient human hero who can inspire others to face their own fears and rise above them. As we continue to explore the aftermath of Batman's encounter with Bane, it becomes clear that the encounter leaves Batman grappling not only with his physical limitations, but with the very core of his identity. The psychological trauma caused by Bane's assault becomes a pivotal turning point in Batman's life, pushing him to address aspects of himself he had long avoided. Batman's fear of Bane is not just about physical defeat, it is a deep existential challenge that forces Batman to face his darkest fears and ultimately reframe his entire approach to heroism, vulnerability, and personal growth. The transformation of Batman Sep's identity, facing the fear of failure. One of the central aspects of Batman's fear of Bane is the fear of failure, which becomes painfully clear in their confrontation. Batman, who has built his life around his capacity for success and control, finds himself face to face with a villain who is capable of defeating him in ways he has never imagined. This confrontation forces Batman to reckon with his greatest fear, the possibility that he may not be able to protect Gotham, that his efforts might be in vain, and that his identity as a hero is not as invincible as he once thought. For Batman, failure is not an option. He has spent years honing his body, mind, and spirit to become the perfect hero, someone who can defeat crime and restore order to Gotham. To fail, particularly in front of an adversary like Bane, is to face the crushing reality that his efforts might not be enough. Bane, with his raw strength and psychological manipulation, serves as a mirror to Batman's worst fear, that all of his planning, all of his training, and all of his sacrifices have been futile in the face of true evil. This fear of failure leads to a deep psychological crisis for Batman, as he is forced to confront the reality that his fear, his greatest motivator, is something he can no longer control. For years, Batman has used fear as a weapon. He strikes fear into the hearts of Gotham's criminals to maintain control. But now, with Bane, the fear is no longer something he controls. It is something that controls him, paralyzing him in a way that his usual tactics cannot overcome. This moment of fear forces Batman to reassess not only his methods, but also his understanding of heroism. True heroism, Batman realizes, is not about never failing, but about how one rises after failure. Bane sips impact on Batman sips sense of justice. The confrontation with Bane also profoundly impacts Batman's sense of justice. Batman has always been guided by a strict moral code, one that revolves around the idea that justice must be delivered at any cost, but without compromising on certain principles. His refusal to kill, his dedication to preventing crime, and his desire to protect Gotham have all shaped his understanding of what it means to be just. However, Bane's assault forces Batman to question these ideals. While imprisoned in the pit, Batman is forced to reflect on his mission and the methods he has used. Bane's power, both physical and psychological, brings Batman to the brink of despair, making him question whether his moral code has been the right approach all along. The realization that he is not invincible shakes his unwavering belief in his ability to always be in control, and it brings him to the painful understanding that his methods, though noble, are not always sufficient to overcome the challenges he faces. For the first time, Batman begins to confront the possibility that his pursuit of justice may be flawed, that his methods might need to evolve in order to achieve the results he desires. This inner conflict is not just about Batman's personal growth. It also speaks to a larger philosophical question about justice. Batman's struggle with his sense of justice becomes an exploration of the limits of idealism in a corrupt world. Can justice truly be achieved without compromise? Can Batman continue to fight without acknowledging the moral ambiguity that often surrounds his mission? These questions become central to his character arc as he faces Bane, and they signal a shift in Batman's understanding of what it means to truly be a hero. The relationship between Batman and Gotham, a new perspective. Bane's challenge forces Batman to reevaluate his relationship with Gotham. For years, Batman has viewed himself as Gotham's sole protector, the city's only hope against its criminal underworld. He has isolated himself from others in order to maintain control, to avoid distraction, and to ensure that he can always be the one to fight for justice. But Bane's attack shatters this solitary mindset. As Batman lies broken, both physically and mentally, he realizes that he cannot continue to carry the burden of Gotham's safety alone. This realization is crucial in Batman's evolution. In the past, he has often distanced himself from others, believing that his burden is his alone to bear. However, after his defeat, Batman comes to understand that Gotham's survival is not just his responsibility, it is a collective effort. He begins to see that Gotham needs more than just one man in a mask. It needs a network of people, each contributing in their own way to the fight for justice. This shift in perspective opens the door for Batman to re-establish and strengthen his relationships with key allies, such as Robin, Nightwing, and Commissioner Gordon. The fear of Bane and the lessons learned from their battle force Batman to recognize that true heroism is not about going it alone. Gotham needs Batman, but it also needs the support of others who are willing to fight alongside him. This realization leads to a more collaborative approach to crime fighting, where Batman learns to trust his allies and work as part of a larger team. This shift not only makes Batman more effective as a leader, but also helps him heal emotionally, as he allows others into his life and recognizes the importance of shared responsibility in maintaining Gotham's safety. The rebirth of Batman, overcoming fear to embrace humanity. In the end, Batman's fear of Bane becomes a transformative force in his life. While it initially exposes his weaknesses and vulnerabilities, it ultimately leads to his rebirth. By facing his fear, accepting his limitations, and reevaluating his methods, Batman becomes a more well-rounded, self-aware hero. His fear, rather than being a sign of weakness, becomes a source of strength, allowing him to connect with others, to understand the complexities of justice, and to accept his own humanity. This transformation is not just about physical recovery, it is about Batman's emotional and psychological growth. By acknowledging the depths of his fear and vulnerability, Batman becomes more than just a symbol of strength. He becomes a symbol of resilience, one who shows that even in the face of overwhelming adversity, it is possible to rise again, to learn from one's mistakes, and to continue the fight for justice. Bane's role in this transformation is undeniable. Without Bane's challenge, Batman may never have confronted the deepest aspects of his psyche. Bane serves as the catalyst that forces Batman to reevaluate his identity, his methods, and his understanding of justice. In this sense, Bane's victory, though temporary, ultimately leads to Batman's greatest victory, the realization that true strength comes not from invulnerability, but from the ability to rise above fear and failure, and to embrace the vulnerability that makes us human. As we continue to delve into the long-lasting effects of Bane's confrontation on Batman, we begin to understand that the encounter with Bane serves not only as a critical turning point in Batman's career, but also as a broader commentary on the nature of heroism, vulnerability, and human resilience. By forcing Batman to confront his deepest fears and vulnerabilities, Bane's assault provides Batman with a chance to reevaluate his purpose, his methods, and the very identity he has constructed for himself. The role of fear in Batman sips heroism from paralysis to action. Batman's initial fear of Bane, along with the physical and psychological breakdown he experiences as a result, serves as a powerful force in the narrative of Batman's growth. Fear, a central theme in Batman's identity, has always been something he has learned to wield as a tool against Gotham's criminals. But Bane's challenge forces Batman to reconsider how fear functions in his life, not just in his role as a hero, but in his personal and emotional existence. For much of Batman's career, he has approached fear with control and precision. He uses fear to dominate his enemies, employing it to manipulate the underworld and ensure that he remains Gotham's symbol of strength and order. However, in his battle with Bane, Batman's fear evolves from a tool of power to a source of emotional paralysis. For the first time in his career, he is rendered powerless, physically broken, and mentally defeated. This shift in the role fear plays in Batman's life becomes crucial to understanding his evolution. Rather than repressing or controlling his fear, Batman learns to accept it and move through it. He no longer sees fear as something to conquer in others, but as a force that he must confront within himself. It is only by accepting fear, not as a weakness, but as a natural human response, that Batman is able to rise from the pit and reclaim his strength. The fear that initially paralyzed him transforms into a source of motivation, driving him to push past his limits and continue the fight for Gotham. Bane's role as the catalyst for Batman's psychological rebuilding. Bane's actions go beyond a mere physical defeat. They force Batman to engage in the most significant psychological rebuilding of his entire career. While Batman's physical injuries can be healed with time, the emotional and psychological toll of Bane's attack requires a deeper, more profound transformation. This period of recovery is not only about regaining Batman's strength, but also about understanding what it truly means to be a hero and how vulnerability plays a crucial part in his mission. In this way, Bane's presence, though destructive, serves as a catalyst for Batman's greatest period of self-discovery. Batman's return from the pit is not just a fight to recover physically, but also a journey of psychological rebirth. By confronting Bane and emerging from his physical defeat, Batman learns that the darkest aspects of himself, the fear of failure, the dread of losing control, and the guilt of not being perfect, are the very things that make him human. Instead of denying these aspects, he learns to embrace them, realizing that heroism is not defined by invulnerability, but by resilience in the face of adversity. This psychological rebirth is crucial for Batman's development. It allows him to confront not just Bane, but also the legacy of his own methods. The realization that Batman is not invincible, that he is not immune to failure, forces him to rethink his approach to justice. He no longer views himself as the solitary force that must carry the weight of Gotham alone. Instead, Batman begins to understand that his vulnerability, his fear, and his humanity are just as important as his strength and intellect in shaping him as a hero. The enduring impact of Bane, Batman's lasting change. The effects of Bane's challenge continue to resonate throughout Batman's story, long after their initial confrontation. By facing his vulnerability head-on, Batman's character is reshaped, leading to lasting changes in his relationships, his leadership, and his approach to crime fighting. Batman, once isolated and defined by his control, becomes more open to working with others, more empathetic, and more willing to acknowledge his flaws. One of the key aspects of Batman's change is his evolving relationship with Gotham's citizens. Where once he was the solitary figure of fear, distanced from the people he sought to protect, Batman now recognizes the importance of human connection. The lesson he learns from Bane, how fear, failure, and vulnerability are integral parts of being human, allows him to form deeper, more meaningful relationships. Batman's empathy for others grows as he comes to realize that Gotham's struggles are not just his burden to bear alone. His fear of Bane, rather than alienating him from Gotham, helps him reconnect with the very people he is meant to protect. This transformation in Batman's character also reshapes his relationships with his allies. In the past, Batman was fiercely independent, often working alone or relying on his trusted sidekicks like Robin and Alfred only when necessary. But following his defeat by Bane, Batman learns to lean on others more. He recognizes that teamwork, trust, and collaboration are necessary components of his mission. No longer does he see himself as the sole protector of Gotham. He understands that he must rely on his allies and, in turn, allow them to support him. Batman sips fear of Bane as a turning point for Gotham's future. Finally, The shift in Batman's understanding of fear and vulnerability has a broader impact on Gotham's future. Batman's fear of Bane not only transforms his approach to crime fighting, but it also changes his relationship with Gotham itself. The people of Gotham see him not just as a figure of power, but as someone who has confronted his own limitations and come back stronger. This evolution in his character gives Gotham hope, not because Batman is invincible, but because he represents resilience, the ability to face defeat and rise again. In a city as chaotic and broken as Gotham, this message of resilience becomes crucial. Batman's transformation from a solitary, invulnerable figure to a more humanized, empathetic hero offers Gotham's citizens a symbol of hope that goes beyond mere strength. It is a hope rooted in the belief that, no matter how dire the situation, it is possible to rise from failure and rebuild. Batman's journey becomes a metaphor for Gotham itself, a city that, despite its flaws, has the potential to rise above its own darkness and find redemption. A new era for Batman and Gotham, embracing imperfection. In the end, Batman's fear of Bane is not just a moment of crisis. It is the beginning of a new era for both Batman and Gotham. Through his defeat and recovery, Batman learns that true heroism does not stem from being impervious to harm, but from having the strength to confront one's own weaknesses and rise again. His battle with Bane teaches him that vulnerability, fear, and failure are not signs of weakness. They are essential components of the human experience. And it is through embracing these elements that Batman becomes a more complete hero, one who can truly understand the complexities of the world around him and continue the fight for justice with renewed purpose. This transformation marks a new phase in Batman's evolution, one that allows him to not only be a protector of Gotham, but a symbol of the resilience and hope that Gotham so desperately needs. Batman's victory over his own fears, instigated by his defeat at Bane's hands, allows him to rise stronger, wiser, and more connected to the city he has sworn to protect. As a result, both Batman and Gotham enter a new chapter, one where fear is no longer something to be conquered, but something to be understood and used as a source of strength. As we continue to explore the aftermath of Batman's encounter with Bane, we dive deeper into the profound transformations that occur within Batman and Gotham. This shift isn't limited to the personal growth of the Dark Knight, but also extends to the city he seeks to protect. Batman's fear of Bane, and the journey it triggers, ultimately has a lasting impact on Gotham itself, one that transcends Batman's individual experience and touches the very fabric of the city's identity. Gotham's shift from dependence to hope. Before Bane's challenge, Gotham had relied on Batman as its singular force of justice. The city's faith in him was rooted in the belief that he was an unshakable symbol of strength, someone who could single-handedly battle the city's overwhelming corruption and crime. However, Bane's victory and Batman's eventual rise from defeat shift this dynamic. Gotham begins to realize that Batman's strength lies not just in his physical abilities, but in his resilience, his ability to overcome fear, and his connection to humanity. Batman's vulnerability in the face of Bane brings a new dimension to his symbol. Rather than representing invulnerability, he now symbolizes the human capacity for recovery and growth. Gotham's people, who once saw him as an unreachable figure, begin to relate to him on a deeper level. His journey through fear, failure, and recovery serves as a powerful reminder to Gotham that even in its darkest moments, there is always hope for redemption. The city begins to see that its future is not determined by one man's strength, but by the collective will of its people to overcome adversity and rise above their own limitations. Batman Sip's role in inspiring a collective effort. With his transformation, Batman's approach to Gotham's crime and corruption evolves. He begins to understand that he cannot fight Gotham's battle alone. While his mission has always been to protect the city, he learns that Gotham's long-term recovery requires more than just the efforts of a single hero. Bane's challenge serves as a wake-up call for Batman, prompting him to become more open to collaboration with the people of Gotham. This shift in mindset allows him to build a stronger network of allies, ones who share his commitment to justice and who, like him, have a deep connection to the city. Batman's willingness to work with others is a reflection of the lesson he learned from his defeat. Strength is not only about individual power, but about collective effort. Gotham's recovery, Batman realizes, depends not just on him but on everyone who is committed to making the city a better place. This recognition makes Batman more effective, not just as a leader, but as a partner to those who are fighting for change in Gotham. He no longer sees himself as the sole protector, but as part of a larger movement that seeks to bring about real, lasting change. Gotham's moral reawakening, the legacy of Batman Sip's fear. Batman's fear of Bane becomes a pivotal moment in Gotham's moral reawakening. Through his personal struggles and growth, Batman begins to understand that Gotham's greatest need is not just for a hero who can fight crime, but for a hero who can inspire others to take responsibility for their city. His transformation from an isolated and vulnerable figure into a more humanized, empathetic hero serves as a powerful example for the people of Gotham. The people of Gotham, who have long been disillusioned by the corruption and crime that plague their city, begin to see Batman not as a distant protector, but as a symbol of hope and resilience. Bane's challenge to Batman forces the city to confront its own fears and limitations, just as Batman has confronted his own. In this way, Batman's struggle with Bane becomes a metaphor for Gotham's larger battle against its own corruption and decay. Gotham, much like Batman, must rise from the pit and embrace the collective strength that comes from unity, compassion, and the willingness to confront its flaws. The role of fear in Batman Sip's future mission. Batman's understanding of fear, shaped by his encounter with Bane, becomes a cornerstone of his future mission. No longer does he see fear as something to dominate or repress. Instead, he learns to use fear as a tool for understanding and growth. This evolution in his perception of fear allows Batman to become a more adaptable and resilient hero. In the past, Batman viewed fear as a tool to instill in his enemies, a psychological weapon that would give him an advantage in the battle against crime. But through his defeat and recovery, Batman understands that fear is not something to be avoided or eradicated, it is something to be embraced. Fear is a natural part of the human experience, and it is only by confronting it head-on that Batman can continue to evolve and adapt to the ever-changing landscape of Gotham's crime. This new understanding of fear allows Batman to be more strategic and less rigid in his approach to crime fighting. He learns to anticipate not just his enemies' moves, but also the unpredictable elements of Gotham's underworld. This flexibility enhances Batman's ability to remain one step ahead of Gotham's criminals, and it makes him more effective in his mission to protect the city. By embracing fear, Batman is able to confront his own limitations and move beyond them, using his experiences to fuel his determination to create a safer Gotham. Batman Sip's legacy of resilience, a hero who overcomes. In the aftermath of his defeat by Bane, Batman's legacy shifts from being one of invincibility to one of resilience. His journey is no longer just about the defeat of criminals, but about the continuous struggle to overcome his own limitations, fears, and failures. Batman's resilience becomes the defining feature of his heroism, a hero who, despite facing his greatest challenges and fears, continues to rise and fight for justice. This transformation in Batman's legacy inspires not just Gotham but also future generations of heroes. The message of Batman's journey is clear. True strength is not defined by invulnerability, but by the ability to face adversity, to accept vulnerability, and to continue the fight for what is right. Gotham's people see in Batman not a perfect hero, but a hero who is deeply human, one who has experienced failure, fear, and loss, but who continues to rise, stronger and more determined each time. In this way, Batman's fear of Bane becomes the foundation of his lasting legacy. It is through this fear, and the subsequent transformation that comes with it, that Batman becomes the hero Gotham needs. The city, much like its protector, learns that real strength lies not in perfection but in resilience, the willingness to confront fear, and the courage to keep going in the face of overwhelming odds. As we continue to explore the profound changes Batman undergoes after his encounter with Bane, it's clear that his transformation is not limited to his understanding of fear or his personal growth. His fear of Bane becomes a central theme that affects his relationships, his strategies, and even his approach to Gotham itself. The lessons learned in the pit extend far beyond the confines of physical pain and psychological breakdown. They shape Batman's entire worldview and his evolving role as Gotham's protector. The shift from solitary vigilantism to collaborative leadership. One of the most significant outcomes of Batman's battle with Bane is the shift in his approach to leadership. In the past, Batman viewed himself as a solitary figure, detached from those around him. His obsessive nature and need for control led him to isolate himself, convinced that the safety of Gotham rested solely on his shoulders. This isolation often resulted in a strained relationship with his allies, particularly Robin, Alfred, and even Commissioner Gordon. While Batman valued their help, he kept them at arm's length, believing that only he could make the difficult decisions required to protect Gotham. However, Bane's challenge forces Batman to confront the fallacy of this approach. His defeat at the hands of Bane serves as a wake-up call, reminding him that Gotham's survival cannot rest on one man's shoulders. He learns that collaboration is not a sign of weakness, but a necessary component of effective leadership. After his recovery, Batman opens up to the possibility of working alongside others, allowing his allies to play a more active role in shaping Gotham's future. This transformation in leadership marks a significant turning point in Batman's approach to justice. He comes to realize that his mission is not just about fighting crime, but about empowering others to fight alongside him. Gotham's recovery will depend not just on his individual strength, but on a collective effort to bring about change. Batman's willingness to trust his allies, whether it's his faithful butler Alfred or his loyal sidekick Robin, signifies a broader shift in his perception of leadership. Rather than seeing himself as the lone protector, Batman becomes the catalyst for a team effort, working together with those who share his vision of a better Gotham. Reevaluating the legacy of the Dark Knight. Another significant aspect of Batman's transformation following his encounter with Bane is his evolving sense of legacy. Before his defeat, Batman saw himself as the ultimate symbol of justice and fear, someone who was invincible, unyielding, and always in control. His legacy was built on his reputation as Gotham's silent protector, a figure who worked outside the law to maintain order and deliver justice. But after being broken by Bane, Batman's view of his own legacy undergoes a radical shift. He begins to realize that his legacy should not be defined by invulnerability or perfection, but by his ability to endure in the face of adversity. The battle with Bane exposes the cracks in the myth of Batman as an invincible figure. Instead of being a symbol of fear, Batman becomes a symbol of resilience. His ability to recover, to rise from his defeat, and to continue fighting for Gotham, despite his vulnerability and fear, becomes the true measure of his greatness. This shift in how Batman views his legacy also impacts how Gotham perceives him. Rather than idolizing the untouchable hero, Gotham begins to see Batman as a more relatable figure, one who, despite his flaws and weaknesses, embodies the spirit of resilience and hope. Batman's fear of Bane and his subsequent recovery remind the people of Gotham that heroism is not about being perfect, but about facing failure, confronting one's fears, and continuing the fight, no matter the odds. This change in perception transforms Batman from a symbol of unchallenged power into a beacon of hope, showing Gotham's citizens that even in their darkest moments, they too can rise above their struggles. Gotham SIP's role in Batman SIP's evolution. Gotham itself undergoes a subtle yet important transformation in response to Batman's experience with Bane. For years, Gotham has been a city in turmoil, plagued by crime, corruption, and decay. Batman has always fought to restore order, but his singular focus on fighting crime has often overshadowed the underlying issues that have kept Gotham in a constant state of unrest. His fear of Bane and the subsequent lessons learned from their confrontation force Batman to reconsider his role in Gotham's future. Batman begins to understand that Gotham's recovery is not just about eliminating crime, but about addressing the root causes of its problems: poverty, inequality, and systemic corruption. The lessons he learns from Bane's challenge push Batman to shift his approach from simply combating crime to actively working toward the restoration of Gotham's institutions. He begins to recognize that his mission is not just about protecting Gotham, but about helping the city heal, rebuild, and transform into a place where crime and corruption no longer hold sway. This shift in Batman's perception of Gotham's needs represents a more holistic approach to justice. Rather than focusing solely on eliminating threats, Batman starts to see the bigger picture. He works to rebuild Gotham's social, political, and economic systems, understanding that true justice requires long-term systemic change. His fear of Bane, which forced him to confront his vulnerabilities, becomes the catalyst for this broader understanding of his role in Gotham's future. Batman's growth, both as a person and as a protector of Gotham, shifts the city's future trajectory from one of decay and disorder to one of resilience and transformation. Batman and the Legacy of Fear. A new understanding of the Dark Knight. In the end, Batman's encounter with Bane serves as the ultimate test of his character. Through the fear that Bane instills in him, Batman is forced to confront not only his physical limits, but also the emotional and psychological barriers he has spent years constructing. His transformation from an isolated and vulnerable figure to a more self-aware, collaborative, and empathetic hero is one of the most significant aspects of his evolution. What is perhaps most striking about this transformation is how Batman's fear of Bane becomes the driving force behind his growth. Rather than allowing fear to break him, Batman uses it to fuel his resilience. The experience teaches him that true heroism is not about perfection or invincibility. It is about confronting one's fears, acknowledging one's limitations, and finding the strength to rise again. In this way, Batman's fear of Bane becomes not just a moment of defeat, but a catalyst for his most profound personal evolution. This understanding of fear, vulnerability, and growth becomes the defining legacy of the Dark Knight, Gotham. having witnessed Batman's transformation, is forever changed. Batman's new approach to leadership, justice, and his own identity resonates deeply with the people he has sworn to protect. The symbol of Batman is no longer one of invincibility, but one of resilience, hope, and the power of overcoming adversity. As we continue to explore the long-term consequences of Batman's encounter with Bane, we begin to see how his transformation not only reshapes his relationship with Gotham, but also redefines his approach to his role as a protector. This new understanding of vulnerability, strength, and fear not only makes Batman a more effective hero, but also allows him to interact with the world around him in a more meaningful and sustainable way. The impact of Bane's challenge is far-reaching, extending beyond the confines of their physical battle and reshaping the very foundation of Batman's existence. The broader implications for Gotham City's future. Gotham's future, much like Batman's, is irrevocably altered by the events surrounding Bane. For years, Gotham has struggled under the weight of crime, corruption, and an oppressive system of power that has kept its citizens in a constant state of fear and suffering. Batman, as the city's protector, has always fought against the criminal underworld, but he has often overlooked the systemic issues that contribute to Gotham's decline. After facing Bane and confronting his own vulnerabilities, Batman comes to realize that his mission cannot simply be about fighting crime. It must also involve working to dismantle the systems that perpetuate Gotham's suffering. Batman's understanding of his role as Gotham's protector evolves into a more comprehensive vision for the city's future. Rather than focusing solely on fighting the criminals who plague the streets, Batman shifts his efforts to addressing the root causes of crime and injustice. His experience with Bane forces him to reevaluate his own approach to justice and leadership, as he recognizes that true justice cannot be achieved through brute force alone. Gotham's problems are not merely the result of individual criminals, but are deeply rooted in the city's corrupt political systems, economic inequality, and social injustices. Batman's renewed focus on systemic change signals a shift in how Gotham's recovery will unfold. Rather than relying solely on his own strength and fear tactics, Batman now understands the importance of collaboration and community engagement in creating lasting change. The lessons learned from Bane's challenge make Batman more open to working with others and empower him to use his resources and influence to bring about real transformation in Gotham. This approach represents a shift from Batman being a lone vigilante to a more collaborative figure who is willing to share the responsibility of Gotham's future with others. Building Gotham City's future, collaboration and collective responsibility. With his new understanding of fear, vulnerability, and the importance of collective action, Batman begins to build stronger relationships with Gotham's key figures. The emotional and psychological shift Batman undergoes after his battle with Bane allows him to engage more openly with his allies, such as Robin, Nightwing, and even the police force. His recognition that no one person can carry the burden of Gotham's recovery on their own leads him to adopt a more collaborative approach to crime fighting and urban renewal. Batman's role in Gotham's future becomes one of mentorship, leadership, and teamwork. He encourages his allies to take an active role in shaping the city's future, recognizing that their combined efforts will be more effective than his singular mission. This transformation in Batman's approach is reflected in his evolving relationship with Robin, who becomes a more prominent figure in Gotham's crime-fighting efforts, and with Commissioner Gordon, who now works alongside Batman as a partner rather than a subordinate. Batman no longer sees himself as the solitary figure who must save Gotham. Instead, he acknowledges the importance of shared responsibility and the need for collective action to bring about meaningful change. This shift in Batman's approach to leadership also influences how Gotham's citizens view him. Rather than seeing Batman as an untouchable figure who operates outside the law, the people of Gotham begin to see him as a symbol of hope and resilience, someone who has faced his own fears and weaknesses and emerged stronger. Batman's evolution into a more collaborative leader inspires the people of Gotham to take an active role in their city's transformation, fostering a sense of collective responsibility and empowerment. Gotham's moral and social awakening, a new beginning. Batman's transformation also parallels Gotham's moral and social awakening. The city, which has long been mired in corruption, crime, and decay, begins to show signs of recovery. Gotham's citizens, inspired by Batman's resilience and his willingness to confront his own vulnerabilities, begin to take a more active role in the fight for justice. Gotham's social structures, once dominated by criminal enterprises and corrupt politicians, begin to break down as the city's people reclaim their power and work together to create a more just and equitable society. In this new Gotham, the fight for justice is no longer just about defeating criminals. It is about addressing the underlying issues that allow crime to thrive in the first place. Batman's fear of Bane and the lessons he learned from his defeat shape this new vision for Gotham. No longer focused solely on physical confrontations with villains, Batman's mission expands to include the pursuit of social and political reform. His fight against crime becomes intertwined with the fight for equality, justice, and the dismantling of corrupt systems that perpetuate injustice. Gotham, much like Batman, learns that real change comes not from fear or control, but from collective effort, resilience, and the courage to confront difficult truths. This moral and social awakening is not limited to Gotham's criminal underworld. It extends to the city's broader political and economic structures. Batman's efforts to reform Gotham are supported by the people, who begin to demand change from their leaders. The city's government, once riddled with corruption, becomes a more transparent and accountable institution, and Gotham's economy begins to recover as social programs and community engagement initiatives take hold. The lessons Batman learns from Bane about resilience, vulnerability, and collaboration are reflected in the city's growing sense of hope and unity. Batman sips fear of Bane, the legacy of growth and transformation. Batman's fear of Bane and the subsequent journey of recovery represent a fundamental shift in Batman's character and his role in Gotham. The encounter forces Batman to confront the most human aspects of his being, his vulnerabilities, his limitations, and his deepest fears. Through this process, Batman emerges not just physically stronger, but emotionally and psychologically transformed. His fear of Bane is no longer a symbol of weakness. It becomes a source of strength, a reminder that true heroism lies not in invulnerability, but in the ability to rise from defeat and continue fighting for justice. This transformation allows Batman to become a more effective hero, a better leader, and a more empathetic figure in Gotham. His willingness to confront his own fears, embrace vulnerability, and collaborate with others makes him a symbol of resilience and hope, not just for Gotham, but for the people who fight alongside him. The legacy of Batman's fear of Bane is not one of defeat, but one of growth, self-awareness, and the power of overcoming adversity. In the end, Batman's journey is a testament to the idea that true strength does not come from invincibility, but from the ability to face one's fears, acknowledge one's weaknesses, and continue the fight, no matter the odds. Batman's fear of Bane, while initially a source of terror and despair, becomes the catalyst for his greatest evolution as a hero. It is through this fear that Batman finds his true strength, one that is rooted not in control, but in resilience, humanity, and the courage to embrace both his strengths and vulnerabilities. As we continue to explore the repercussions of Batman's transformation following his battle with Bane, we uncover the deeper implications of his personal evolution and how it extends to Gotham, both in terms of his influence and his role within the city. This transformative period in Batman's life marks a significant shift not only in his understanding of himself, but also in how he engages with Gotham's challenges. The lessons he learns from his defeat are now integrated into his approach to crime, justice, and leadership, allowing him to lead Gotham into a new era, one characterized by resilience, hope, and a more collective approach to solving its problems. Batman's new approach to crime fighting, embracing adaptability. One of the most profound changes Batman undergoes following his defeat by Bane is his approach to crime fighting. Before his encounter with Bane, Batman had always relied on his rigorous planning, precise control over every situation, and his exceptional tactical skills to maintain order in Gotham. However, the vulnerability he experienced during his time in the pit and his eventual recovery taught him that flexibility and adaptability are essential qualities for effective leadership and heroism. Bane's victory reveals that Batman's past methods, although effective, are not foolproof. His reliance on preparation and control becomes a limitation when faced with a truly unpredictable and formidable opponent. Batman's transformation leads him to understand that adaptability, being able to respond quickly to unforeseen circumstances, becomes a critical aspect of his ability to continue the fight for Gotham. By embracing the fluidity of his mission and accepting that not everything can be anticipated, Batman becomes a more dynamic and resilient hero, able to adjust to changing circumstances rather than being rigidly tied to a single approach. This shift from a rigid, control-based model to a more flexible, adaptable strategy also allows Batman to be more creative in how he addresses Gotham's problems. He can no longer rely on brute force or meticulous planning alone. Instead, he must innovate and evolve in real time, using his allies and resources in more collaborative ways. This adaptability strengthens his ability to respond to emerging threats, allowing him to engage with Gotham's criminal underworld in a more fluid and impactful manner. Expanding the concept of justice beyond the bat symbol. Another critical aspect of Batman's transformation after his encounter with Bane is his evolving concept of justice. Batman's fear of Bane and the subsequent realization that his methods cannot always guarantee success force him to reconsider what it truly means to deliver justice in Gotham. For years, Batman has pursued a brand of justice that is rooted in his own moral code, one defined by his refusal to kill and his focus on personal vengeance for his parents' deaths. His justice has always been about punishing wrongdoers and imposing his will on the criminals of Gotham. However, after his defeat by Bane, Batman begins to see justice in a broader, more inclusive light. He understands that true justice is not only about punishing criminals, but also about addressing the social, economic, and political structures that allow crime to thrive in the first place. His encounter with Bane forces him to confront the limitations of his own perspective, his belief that his singular mission can solve Gotham's problems. Instead of seeing himself as the sole force of justice, Batman comes to recognize that his mission must be part of a larger movement for change within Gotham, one that addresses the systemic issues of inequality, corruption, and social injustice. This realization shifts Batman's mission away from a narrow focus on individual crimes and toward a more comprehensive effort to reform Gotham. He begins to understand that justice is not just about confronting criminals, but also about dismantling the systems of power that enable crime and corruption to thrive. This transformation in Batman's understanding of justice marks a significant departure from his previous mindset, where his efforts were focused solely on stopping crime through physical action and fear. Rebuilding Gotham, a collective responsibility. As Batman evolves, so too does his approach to Gotham's rebuilding. Bane's challenge forces Batman to recognize that Gotham's recovery cannot rest on his shoulders alone. The city's problems are too deep-rooted and its issues too complex for any single individual to solve. Batman, now more self-aware and open to collaboration, begins to see Gotham's future as a collective effort. His fight for justice expands from a one-man mission to a citywide movement. Gotham's recovery is now about more than just Batman fighting crime in the shadows. It is about empowering the people of Gotham to take responsibility for their own futures. Batman's leadership begins to embrace this collective approach. He works alongside trusted allies like Robin, Nightwing, and Commissioner Gordon, but he also opens the door to greater community involvement. The people of Gotham are no longer passive recipients of Batman's protection. They are active participants in the city's recovery. Batman's willingness to share responsibility and trust his allies helps to build a sense of shared purpose among Gotham's citizens. This collective effort becomes crucial in Gotham's rehabilitation. The city's rebuilding requires not just a physical restoration, but also a shift in the collective mindset. Gotham's citizens, inspired by Batman's transformation, begin to take ownership of their city's future. Community initiatives, social justice programs, and grassroots movements gain traction as the people of Gotham start to demand change from their leaders and work together to improve their surroundings. Batman's role in this process is no longer just as a lone vigilante, but as a symbol of collective action, showing that Gotham's survival depends not on one hero, but on the efforts of its entire community. A new symbol for Gotham, the evolution of the bat signal. One of the most profound transformations in Batman's legacy following his defeat by Bane is the evolution of the bat signal as a symbol. Traditionally, the bat signal has been a beacon of hope, a call for Batman's intervention. It has been the symbol of Gotham's reliance on Batman as the sole protector of the city. However, as Batman evolves into a more collaborative leader and justice becomes a collective effort, the bat signal begins to take on a new meaning. Rather than solely representing Batman's lone vigilance, the bat signal now symbolizes the collective will of Gotham's people. It becomes a reminder that the fight for justice is not one man's mission, but a shared responsibility. As Gotham's citizens join forces with Batman and his allies, the bat signal transforms into a symbol of unity, resilience, and hope. It signifies that Gotham's future is not determined by one individual, but by the people who live within it. The bat signal, once a call for Batman's intervention, becomes a reminder that Gotham is capable of change. It serves as a rallying point for all those who wish to see their city healed. The evolution of the bat signal reflects Batman's own growth and the shift in Gotham's understanding of justice. As the city learns to embrace collective responsibility and self-empowerment, the bat signal evolves from a symbol of Batman's invincibility into one of shared hope and determination. As we conclude this deep exploration of Batman's transformation following his fear and defeat at the hands of Bane, it becomes clear that this pivotal encounter not only reshapes Batman as a person, but redefines his role as Gotham's protector. What was initially a moment of vulnerability, defeat, and fear for Batman transforms into a powerful catalyst for change, not just within himself, but within the very fabric of Gotham. Batman's fear of Bane, which exposed his vulnerabilities and forced him to face his own limitations, is not a sign of weakness, but rather a profound moment of humanization. It is through this fear that Batman learns his greatest lesson. True strength does not lie in invulnerability or control, but in resilience, the ability to face adversity, acknowledge one's shortcomings, and rise stronger. The journey Batman undergoes from that fear to his eventual recovery is not simply about reclaiming physical strength. It is about emotional growth, introspection, and embracing the very humanity that he has long tried to suppress. Through his transformation, Batman's leadership evolves. He learns that being a true leader is not about solitary strength or dominance, but about collaboration and shared responsibility. Gotham, much like Batman, must rise from its fear, its corruption, and its oppression through collective effort, not one man's fight. By opening himself up to others, trusting his allies, empowering Gotham's citizens, and accepting the assistance of those around him, Batman shifts from a symbol of fear to one of hope and resilience. He becomes not just a protector, but a beacon of strength for Gotham's people, teaching them that they too have the power to shape their future. The impact of Bane's challenge extends beyond Batman's personal evolution. It reshapes Gotham's approach to justice. Batman's renewed focus on systemic change, collective responsibility, and empathy becomes the driving force behind Gotham's moral and social awakening. Gotham begins to realize that justice is not about punishing criminals alone, but about confronting the root causes of crime and corruption. Batman's transformation inspires the city to rise above its flaws and work together to rebuild a better Gotham. In this way, Batman's fear of Bane is not just a catalyst for his personal growth, but for Gotham's collective rebirth. Finally, the bat signal, once a symbol of Batman's solitary and invincible nature, evolves into a powerful symbol of unity and hope. It becomes a rallying cry for Gotham's people, a reminder that their strength lies not in one man, but in their ability to come together to fight for a better future. Gotham learns that its true power is not in fear or control, but in resilience, compassion, and the courage to confront its own darkness. In the end, Batman's legacy is not one of perfection or invulnerability, but one of resilience, vulnerability, and transformation. His journey through fear, failure, and recovery reshapes not only his identity, but the very soul of Gotham. Batman teaches the people of Gotham that true heroism does not come from being invincible, but from having the courage to confront one's fears, accept one's flaws, and rise again, stronger and more determined than ever. The Dark Knight, in facing his greatest challenge and confronting his own vulnerabilities, ultimately becomes the hero Gotham and the world truly needs. One who leads not by the absence of fear, but by the power to endure and transform in the face of it.